to say goodbye to Venmo, Zelle, PayPal, and Cash App because FedNow is coming and you don't have a choice. FedNow is a payment service by the government coming out in July that your bank will have to sign up for, which is the first step to make the dollar digital. Now, how does this work? Well, if you buy something on Amazon, your money won't go directly to Amazon anymore. It will first go through the Fed's account and then go to Amazon. This means the government will know everything you use your money for, and if they want to, they can reject any purchase you make, take money out whenever, and decide what you can and can't spend your money on. Yes, it will be faster for payments to settle, easier to get stimulus, and lowers costs that you have to pay to your banks, but your privacy is gone. So is it truly worth it? And guess what? You don't even have a choice to participate or not. Our banks are the ones who will decide.
Ecclesiasticus chapter 27 and verse 2. As a nail sticketh fast between the joinings of the stones, so doth sin stick close between buying and selling. Shalom, brothers and sisters. This is your brother Hawaii Allah. I want to give all glory and praises to our Heavenly Father Yahweh. And we do so in the name of our Lord and Savior Yahawashi. Grace and mercy be bound to the hopeful elect, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth, and awaiting of the second coming of our Lord and Savior Yahawashi. Today, of course, you know that is a so-called month of July, and it's the first of the so-called month. And we know that a lot of talk has been going on about FedNow. As you've seen in the video, it kind of discussed a little bit about how FedNow works and how it's a stepping stone towards the central bank digital currency. As you know, over the years, I've done many lessons concerning this topic, and the evolution of that has shown forth that the things that were said aforetime are coming to pass. And what we do know is that this system is something that everybody will have to join in, at least on a digital level. Now, it's supposed to lead, of course, to the CBDC, which is going to be a global system, which is something that also we've talked about over time. And one of the things we have to understand is that a lot of people, especially in these last days, are going to be in a state of confusion. We know that in time past, when certain events happened, whether it was the situation with the COVID shutdown, that people were saying, this is the Motb or that is the Motb, not fully understanding what the prophecy says about the Motb. Okay, that it's tied to buying and selling. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to go into an article. This is from the Forbes, and they actually go into FedNow. Okay, and this actually just dropped earlier this morning. It says, what is FedNow? The Federal Reserve's new instant payment service. Okay, just like we always talked about, the instantaneous transaction aspect is what is very important for this system to work. Okay, and we'll kind of go over what this is going to be speaking on in regards to this article. So as we started here at the top, it says, when FedNow, the Federal Reserve's new instant payment platform, begins in July, it will be the first new rail since real-time payments launched in 2017. Backed by the Fed and offering instant money movement, FedNow might at first glance seem similar to real-time payments, RTP, in that they both clear and settle U.S. domestic payments 24/7. But comparing RTP versus FedNow directly shows that each method offers unique advantages for different use cases. Now, one of the things about payment systems, you have different payment processors that have actually risen up, over the last few years. Among those is Zelle, and you have Cash App. Of course, we later on knew about what was known as, cryptocurrency, starting with Bitcoin. Many years back in 2016, I did a lesson on an article in regards to, I believe it was from Bloomberg, and it was a celebration at the New York Stock Exchange about a meeting that was had over the success of the creation of blockchain, which essentially allows for a digital ledger for instantaneous, seeing of payments. Basically, money flowing in, money flowing out, and who and where it is happening. And this particular development, this particular program was used in conjunction with the rise of the cryptocurrency system. Okay, so it actually helped fuel a lot of these systems that you see today. And there was a lot of things that they were studying in regards to the implementation of blockchain, which a lot of companies are using in other areas as well, including tracking of different things that are shipped. A lot of your companies that deal with shipping logistics now also use blockchain in those means as well. So now as we go on, we're going to see exactly like what FedNow is about. And mind you, they're not going to go into the sinister aspects of this. You have to remember that these particular entities are about corporate interests and hiding the real reason as to why they're having these particular systems being put in place. So it says here, first, let's look at what FedNow is. FedNow is an upcoming instant payment platform designed to safely and effectively provide access to funds in real time, 24/7, 365. This new rail will move money between sending and receiving banks instantly, so that receiving party has access to funds within seconds. FedNow guarantees this will happen within 20 seconds and often much faster. Now, part of the reason why this is important for them is because this allows instantaneous control as also. What anybody's known, if you have a bank account, you have a debit card, or you do wire transfers, you notice that there always is a certain time. If you go, you look in your bank and you say, I want to send a wire transfer to somebody, they'll give you an estimated time that will be usually more than a day, right? In addition to that, you can go and buy something, but the money may not come out. This leads to problems. Even recently I had a big payment that I had to make on basically a purchase. And what happened was the actual money that I sent, it took some time to clear, and come to find out the company that I was paying, they had an issue on their end to where it ended up having to be reversed back, and then I had to resend it again. And all this back and forth literally took, 3 days, okay? Because there was a delay in which they realized there was a problem on their end. And then I had to get direct message directly from one of their employees. And then I had to go and wait for the money to actually fully settle into my account because it was pending. And then after it pended, I sent it back. And the reason why I had to do that is because I didn't want to have a double payment, which people know happens quite a bit. This will also prevent something like a double payment, and it'll prevent this delay of transaction in a business sense. So this is why they're doing it. Now, we know about the different payment platforms such as Cash App and Zelle. This is what the federal government is doing with this FedNow, is making it on this particular level, okay? But it's even going to be quicker, and it's going to allow for a lot more monitoring. Because remember, under those other things such as Zelle and Cash App, you can send money for whatever reason, and they don't know why you're sending money, okay? People send money for illicit reasons via those platforms, and the banks don't know as to why, okay? They just settle it, and you just go about your day. With FedNow, they can then monitor and basically question, investigate as to why you're sending this money and why this person is receiving this money. Okay, this allows for a lot heavier control. So as we read further on, it says FedNow will also settle and clear online payments 24/7, 365, including nights, weekends, and holidays. Because one thing everybody knows is that if there's a so-called holiday going on, you may want to do a particular transaction at the bank, but if they're closed, for example, you have July 4th coming up, banks are going to be closed because it's considered a federal holiday. So if there was particular transactions you wanted to do that day, there could be a delay of you being able to do it, okay? And then a lot of times it takes a little bit longer for some of those things to settle, meaning things to clear. Now, the word settle, remember, settling of transactions, right? Both debits and credits, is something that we have to also consider. If you recall, months ago, I did a lesson on the Motb in regards to the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, okay, which is where all of this is tied to in Basel, Switzerland. So understand when they're talking about settlements, they're talking about something that's on an international scope level. that is dealing with the central bank system, particularly the BIS, which is the Bank of International Settlements, okay, which will oversee a lot of these transactions on the international scale. So now as we go further on, it says the banks on both sides of the transaction instantaneously exchange the necessary information to immediately move the money between customer accounts, and interbank settlements happens after the receiving bank has confirmed the recipient's account information. Both the sender and receiver are notified whether the payment was successful. With what's more, the backing of the Federal Reserve means FedNow can immediately ensure both banks are made whole. When money is sent, it comes out of the sending institution's master account at the Fed, and it's deposited into the receiving bank's Fed account. And if you go back, George Gammon, this is why I recommended you brothers and sisters watch George Gammon, particularly you brothers that are interested in understanding how these things will come to pass. As you know, that we are going to be searching out in ways in which our salvation will occur, and we want to know the signs. We got to keep up with it, right? We can't be ignorant of any matter, whether great or small. In one of his videos, and I forgot which one, but some of you brothers may recall, he actually shows how all these banks are actually tied to the Fed. They actually had direct accounts with the Fed. And so when you look at the way this transaction will work, it will basically go directly to the Fed, and the Fed will basically settle it on behalf of the other bank on the other side. This allows for a centralized control system with the Federal Reserve for all these transactions, okay? And why is that important? Because they are other means in which people were able to do, these things. They're able to buy and sell without the Fed knowing, which we'll get into as well. So now we're going to go further on. It says, now let's compare the RTP, real-time payments, often called RTP, or the RTP network, is a system introduced by the Clearinghouse in 2017. True to its name, RTP processes U.S. domestic payments 24/7, 365 with immediate settlement. That sounds pretty similar to FedNow, but RTP works differently in how it accesses interbank liquidity and confirms settlements. Notice that word settlements keeps coming up, like we talked about prior. Now it says here, financial institutions have to opt in to become part of the RTP network, but most customers have access. The Clearinghouse estimate it's accessible to institutions that hold about 90% of U.S. demand deposit accounts, the DDAs. The process is pretty seamless for customers. The person sending the payment initiates the transaction as a credit push. Remember, I talked about debits and credits, okay? And the RTP network processes the payments individually in real time. To do that, the RTP network requires participating funding institutions to hold a separate pooled account for liquidity purposes at the clearinghouse. Interbank settlement happens immediately. Before the receiving bank confirms details of the recipient's account. As with FedNow, both the sender and receiver of the RTP transactions get payment status updates instantaneously to confirm success and the amount paid. Okay, so you see the interbank settlement. That is what the difference is. It says to do that, RTP networks require participating funding institutions to hold a separate pooled account for liquidity purposes at the clearinghouse. So instead of holding it at the Fed, they have a certain amount of money that they are able to liquidate from their own clearinghouse. And this is what was allowing these instant payment systems to occur under the RTP network. They were not doing it through the Fed. They were doing it through the clearinghouse. Okay, that is the big difference. So it says interbank settlement happens immediately before the receiving bank confirms details of the recipient's account. So when it happens, when this interbank settlement happens, it's without the actual bank being able to confirm the recipient's amount. Okay, it's a trust thing with the clearinghouse that everything is there and everything is going to be a-okay on the other side with the bank that is giving the money to the other party. All right. So that's why it says, as with FedNow, both the sender and receiver of RTP transactions get payment status updates instantly to confirm success and the amount paid. So it says, to recap, similarities, both FedNow and RTP offer 24/7, 365 payments, processing, instant and irrevocable settlement, access for customers with accounts at institutions that have opted in. This is one of the reasons why, if you, some of you probably are familiar with this. If you have a Zelle, let's say you try to set up a Zelle and you try to set up a Zelle that was with a bank, like maybe a credit union that wasn't with Zelle, then you couldn't even use Zelle, right? Same things to a certain degree with Cash App, right? If you were using a particular thing in a particular bank, sometimes you have like online banks, or you might have a credit union, and they may not have a partnership, right? So there'll be issues with you being able to have these particular transactions take place, okay? Whereas under the FedNow, this will be zero issue, all right? There will be no issue, because if you bank at a small credit union or a local bank, they would have to be already tied in with the Federal Reserve, okay? Now, we go into the rest of it. Confirmation of transaction for both senders and recipients. It says, and transaction limits that are lower than that of the ACH and wires, which is the automated clearinghouse and wires. Okay, this is like how you would go about, let's say, if you wanted to pay rent, right? You might have your bank account tied to, or, you know, your rent, your mortgage, your car notes. Those are the type of things that use, you know, automated clearinghouse, wire transfers. If you wanted to send a certain amount of money, remember, you know, banks have limitations on wire transfers, so you have to send a certain amount. You can wire transfer it. These are things that it's referring to as well. Okay, so now let's look at some of the key differences between FedNow and RTP. Now it says transaction limits. RTP has a jump on FedNow here, as RTP offers transactions up to $1 million. At FedNow, the default limit will be $100,000, with financial institutions having the ability to request up to $500,000. But there is an important note: for the 2023 launch year, the Fed has said it will limit transactions to $25,000. Unless that limit is increased, FedNow may not work for larger businesses looking to send big transactions. That means that at first, FedNow may end up primarily focusing on smaller organizations and peer-to-peer payments, okay? This is like your PayPal, okay? Your Cash App, your Zelle. So peer-to-peer payments, right? You wanted to send some money, you want to send money to a family member, a friend, and boom, you're using FedNow. There's a limitation, right? You see the amount limited will later on eventually increase. That's the plan ultimately. Now, what could also happen with the FedNow is that let's say you wanted to buy a vehicle cash, right? It's possible that maybe if you go to a dealership, they may only accept that particular payment under what? Under FedNow. Okay? So now that's another way for them to protect themselves as a business. Also, it's to monitor different transactions by who is doing what, right? Because in some instances, people are able to skirt around with other options such as cash, which we'll definitely get into. Now, and remember, they're trying to limit how people are spending their money as well, and who can spend money on what, okay? Because, for example, you might have somebody that has a driver's license suspended, right? They can still go and buy a car cash at a dealer lot, right? Under like a digital currency system, CBDC, if a person has a suspended license, or maybe they have DUIs and things like that, and they're also not allowed to buy a car, and then you take away cash, now they have to go through FedNow. FedNow can instantaneously reject based off of where they're buying. They're buying from an automotive group that is already tied and known by the system, and they can instantaneously reject the transaction. So these are just examples of like control mechanisms that will be in place with these digital currency systems. Okay, so it says access here. FedNow may have the advantage. One of the FedNow's biggest differentiators is its integration with the Federal Reserve's larger network, which means it will be accessible to smaller local banks and communities across the U.S., which is exactly what I told you. Because, like I said before, you have smaller banks, local banks, credit unions that may not be under these peer-to-peer processing systems that where you can't use Zelle. That's the reason why when you go into there, you look at like Zelle and you log in, it'll ask, what's your bank? When you set up your account to set up a Zelle account. And if your bank's not on there, you don't have an option, right, to use Zelle. So this is why there's an access. This doesn't happen with the bigger banks. It's happening with the smaller banks many times, okay? And so that's what is a differentiator with how FedNow would work, okay? So it says RTP is also widespread at the clearinghouse. Estimates it's accessible to institutions that hold up to 90% of U.S. demand deposits accounts, DDAs, though the network currently reaches only 62% of DDAs, as not all institutions will have access, have chosen to opt in. The thousands of institutions currently integrated with RTP can be found at the clearinghouse website, and some customers may find that their local community banks aren't on the list, okay, which is what I stated earlier. Between the launch of FedNow and the existing availability of RTP, opportunity abounds for businesses in search of making the promise of faster payments a reality. Having both in the financial system will certainly lay the groundwork for a more efficient financial future. Okay? Now, what is that financial future? The financial future is based off of this. Basically, you have the U.S. Department of Treasury. In the U.S. Department of Treasury, you see here, this is the government. This is Secretary of Statements and Remarks. Statements from the Secretary of Treasury, Janet L. Yellen, on the release of reports on digital assets. This is September 16, 2022. It says the U.S. Department of Treasury today published 3 reports pursuant to Sections 4, 5, and 7 of President Joe Biden's Executive Order 14067 on ensuring responsible development of digital assets. The report addresses the future of money and payment system, consumer and investor protection, and illicit finance risk. Now, very interestingly enough, as y'all know, the video that we've always played before with Joe Biden decades ago talking about, or about a couple of decades ago, this is prior to him being a VP. She talks about how in the future they'll need to vote on a Class 2 medical device that will be embedded into people's hands. And basically, he is the president that is one of the ones that understands the system that they're trying to create. Hence the reason why this is such a big deal for him to sign this executive order. Okay, so we have to understand that this is something that's been in place. A lot of people think that things are just basically just being done on the fly, but things have been planned out for decades, okay? Actually centuries, because going back to the time that the elites of Edom took over, they've always trying to implement higher levels of control over the masses, okay? So it says here, innovation is one of the hallmarks of a vibrant finance system and economy, but as we have learned painfully from the past, innovation without appropriately addressing the impact of these developments can result in significant disruptions and harm to the financial system and individuals, especially our more vulnerable populations. The report clearly identified the real challenges and risk of digital assets used for financial services. At the same time, if these risks are mitigated, digital assets and other emerging technologies could offer significant opportunities. These reports and their recommendations provide a strong foundation for policymakers as we work to realize the potential benefits of digital assets and to mitigate and minimize the risk. Now, these are the sections that Janet Yellen was referring to. It says here the future of money and payments, implications of consumer, investor, and businesses, and then also action plan to address illicit financing risk of digital assets. Now, I'm not going to read all of it. This is very long. However, I'm going to show you one thing that they're talking about. Okay. Now, if you go back, we also talked about the history of money. Okay. Go back and watch the lesson about the history of money. This is talking about now the future of money. Okay. So now this is from the PDF. This is section 4. This is the PDF. Okay. It is actually 56 pages long. However, I'm going to go into an area that just deals with one aspect, because this is something that we've been talking about for years that they're going to do. Okay, now they talk about the CBDC in this. This is the introduction. But I'm going to go further down, and I'm just going to show you something that is important for them to fulfill what they're trying to do, is to eliminate. Now, here it is, the clearing and settlements. As you notice, they're actually, the clearing and settlement has parentheses around it, right? They're basically putting quotation marks. They're putting parentheses in certain areas, like how much, whom. They're showing you where in areas that they're looking to emphasize, right? Now, one of the things that's very important for them is to make sure that all of these things go through a system that they can monitor, okay? Now, I'm going to just read this first part. It says, payment systems facilitate the exchange of goods and services for money, and as such enable the economy to function. Remember, this is about buying and selling and the control of that, okay? Which is essentially to control the masses into a digital slave. Now, how do they usually do it? They usually do it through various means, but they're going to talk about one means that they're looking to get rid of. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to start in this part right here in general. So in general, consumers and businesses use retail payment systems, while banks and other financial institutions access wholesale payment systems. Retail payment systems process high volumes of lower value transactions on behalf of consumers and businesses and may not settle instantly, i.e. in real time. Wholesale payment systems support larger value transactions for a financial institution and government agencies and may use some form of real-time or continuous settlement. A single form of money can use more than one payment system. For example, private bank money, i.e. deposits, can be transferred using checks, automated clearinghouse systems, or debit cards. Okay, now mind you, these are systems that they consider to be a bit slower than what they would like. They're not real-time instantaneous. Now here's another one, right? Physical currency is the simplest form of payments and embodies many essential features that non-cash payment systems seek to emulate. A payment in cash settles immediately, does not rely on extension of credit by a third party, enables recipients to access the proceeds of a transaction immediately. Cash is also nearly universally accepted, does not carry an additional charge or fee per transaction, and typically protects users' privacy, which may be valuable for a wide array of consumers, including vulnerable populations. Now, if you think about it, right, if you've gone to a gas station, they'll have a sign. I don't know what it's like in other states. I know in Texas, right, they'll have the sign of how much gas is if you pay with your debit or credit card, and then they have a lower price if you pay with cash. The reason why is because when you pay with a debit or credit card, those actually incur a fee per transaction that the gas station would have to pay, okay? So there's a tacked on fee for that transaction. You can lower it or eliminate it by just paying cash, and which is the reason why it talks about no additional fees are tacked on under cash systems. Now they talk about the vulnerable populations as well. As you know, across the world, you have people that are in various countries where they will be considered maybe illegal, or they may not be allowed to stay in the country, or they may not be able to access a bank, right? Meaning if they go to a particular country, they can't even use their debit because they're not a citizen. Therefore, they cannot use a debit card or credit card, and therefore they have to do everything in cash, right? This leads to people also on further end, which we'll talk about in the next level. It says, at the same time, cash is inconvenient for large transactions, is vulnerable to being lost or destroyed, and cannot be sent or requested automatically. In addition, many cash transactions cannot be audited. This is a big deal to them because this means they can't control how cash is being spent. Now, the aspect of not being able to send it automatically makes sense, right? So, for example, if someone had a family member in another city and all you have is cash, you can't send it. You can't send cash instantaneously. You would now have to go through a Western Union, or you might have to deposit the money into your account and then wire it, okay? Or you might have to use, something like a Zelle or a Cash App, right? So cash is gonna hold back from those things. However, it helps protect the privacy of those that are using it, okay? Because one can basically buy things and it not be audited by the powers that be, particularly the Fed, right? Which is what they want to do. They want to audit every transaction, okay? And it's not because, they just want to know what's being spent. No, they want to be able to control. They want to be able to punish and reward. They want to be able to limit as well, okay? So it goes here, the risk of counterfeit, theft, or error is largely borne by direct participants to the transaction, as financial institutions have strengthened anti-money laundering controls. Terrorists and other criminals have increasingly turned to cash to transfer funds, capitalizing on its anonymity, portability, and liquidity. Okay? One of the things that they were going to use, and I've said it for years, is that when they bring in the digital currency system, one of the things they're going to talk about is basically the underworld, the black market, criminal organizations, pimping, okay, prostitution, terrorism, all these things. They're going to be able to say, hey, we have to get rid of cash because it leads to these things, right? You got smuggling, right, of people, drugs. These are done primarily through cash, okay? This is the reason why many drug busts, they find not only the drugs, but they find large quantities of cash. I was watching a documentary on the BMF, and they were in the documentary, they were talking about how cash was used for their transactions. And one of the things that they were doing is they had stash houses with cash where they can get cash and they can give it to whoever they need to get to their connect. And then also they had cash stored inside cars. They had secret storage compartments within their vehicles where they can access a lot of their cash as well. So this is something that is actually used by criminal organizations to get some of their business transactions done. This is one of the reasons why they are going to try and eliminate the cash system, because of that aspect of controlling the underworld as well, right? So that's another thing that they're looking into. In addition to the people that are not doing crime, they want to control how they're spending money and where and who they're spending it with. Now, it says, by definition, non-cash payment systems transfer money in a form other than physical currency. Non-cash payment systems include, but are not limited to, large value funds, transfer systems, ACH operators, and credit and debit card systems. Together, these systems offer features that cash cannot. Okay, and it goes into some of the same things we talked about already. Now, this goes further on. Cross-border payments. This is one of the reasons why they're doing the CBDC. The head of the oversight of cross-border payments will be something like the Bank of International Settlements. In addition to that, you also have these cross-border payment systems that were created by, I believe, China, Russia. Basically, the BRICS has their own system that they're trying to create for their cross-border payment system. So this is very, very big. That is not just a local thing. Remember, this is a global system. Ours is just known and set up in the way that we're in our particular place that we're in. We're going to have to deal with the Fed. We're going to deal with their federal system, their digital system, and we have to understand how it's going to come about, because people will be panicking out here. Okay, people will be misinterpreting these systems being set up, and it's going to cause a lot of confusion amongst the masses, particularly those in Israel who do not understand the prophecies, right? So I'm not going to read this up, but I highly recommend that y'all actually go again to this article. You can just search it. This deals with the Executive Order 14067, and you see here the PDF is simply this. You can just right click, open up a new tab. You can read all this stuff, skip through it for more information. Now, what I recommend that y'all do is go to George Gammon's channel. He's going to go into some of this stuff. It is almost 40 minutes long. However, it is very important that if you're trying to understand this, if you haven't watched any of his other videos and you want to start somewhere, start with this, okay? To understand how this system is going to work and what the outcome could be on the bad end for those that are under it, right? So let's go ahead and finish this off. This is Revelation chapter 13. And we'll start at verse 16. And he calls it all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Okay? So we understand that in the last days, they're going to implement a system, okay, which is a system that is dealing with buying and selling, and it doesn't matter who you are, this system is going to be put upon you. However, there's an aspect of the system that will be put in one's hand, okay, and also forehead. So you have to understand that as well. We'll deal with that in future lessons as well. We also have past lessons that deals with that, so that way we can kind of see exactly the track of where this is going. However, they have to set up something like this first before they can implement that next level system. So hopefully this is edifying to you, brothers and sisters. And again, I want to give all glory and praises to our Heavenly Father Yahweh, and we do so in the name of our Lord and Savior Yahawashi. Grace and mercy be abound to the hopeful elect scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Shalom.